Welcome into Top Shelf. I'm Aidan Thakkar with my guys, John Matisz, Kyle Cushman, Levi Smith, and this is our last edition of Top Shelf for the season, off-season, I guess. We are into that swing. I thought it was going to be like an electric, crazy start to the off-season, and it might be one of the most deflating starts.
Did you see the UFA list? Are you sure you were on
Well,
the
the
same page
days
as
leading
us?
up to it were fun. It was just
That's
July
true.
1 was
Everyone's
a
like, the draft is going to be like top 10 picks move, big names going left and right, and it's like, oh, there was like 2 trade-ups,
Dobson.
and it just slowed the draft down by 4 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a little painful of an NHL draft lengthwise, but today we are going to touch on every single team. I don't even know if every single team has actually made a legitimate big move so far in this offseason, but we're going to touch on them, and we're actually going to do 5 words to describe each and every single one of these teams. You guys can kind of spin that however you want. Like, it can be like 5 words, your thoughts, 5 words on like what you think they should do, where they are. I mean, whatever, however it makes sense to you, you can take it. We're just going to start at the top of the list, and John, I'll let you take it away with Anaheim.
Yeah, this is less of a question or a statement. It's just 5 words together that can launch me into a certain place. Quenneville and the power play puzzle. So Anaheim's power play, horrendous last year, 11.8% in a league that, the average is around 20. It was really awful. They trade Zegras, but then they bring in Kreider and they bring in Granlund. I wonder, under this new coaching regime of Joel Quenneville, can they turn that around? Obviously, that falls under the offense in general. The Ducks were not a pretty team to watch, both offensively and defensively last year. They basically dined out on good goaltending and still only got 80 points. So with the Ducks, my mind just immediately goes to that power play because they have a lot of enticing players that can, make some noise on there. Carlson, Gauthier, Granlund's a great passer, Kreider, net front. There's a 3 or 4 defensemen that could run the point there. So, yeah, that's where my mind goes with the Ducks right now.
It looks like they're really excited about that Roger McQueen guy, that draft pick,
Yeah.
and I wonder if either he or Seneca could make a push to make the team.
The fact that McQueen picked number 95, immediate Hall of Fame career.
Yeah,
So
super
awesome.
electric. Also,
Put him in.
Awesome how they flew him out to Disney
Right?
after. That's Anaheim's doing something right now.
Ka-chow, baby. Love it.
Yeah.
Team that I don't know if they're doing a lot right now. Boston Bruins, Levi.
Yes, Boston Bruins. Summed up in 5 words, I've got the rebuild is finally here. And if I were to add a couple more, I would probably say, do they know that? Because
Nice.
obviously we saw what happened with the Boston Bruins last season. They were sellers at the deadline. They seem to be going in the right direction. Like, let's keep kind of our core of Pasternak, McAvoy, Swayman. We'll build around that. They draft James Higgins, which is a great start to a rebuild, or to at least kind of retool with some younger guys, and then free agency hits, and they just bring in like some gritty bottom 6 forwards with like Sean Corrali's back. They trade for Arvidsson, and then they
Tanner Jeannot.
Tanner
5
Jeannot,
times
yeah.
3.4.
Arguably
Yeah.
the worst contract of the day.
With
Absurd.
some
I raise you Cody Ceci.
yeah, but
that was crazy.
Tanner
too.
Jeannot got like full no trades and stuff like that on his deal too.
Crazy.
It's shocking.
Those 3 guys that I just named, they had 3 players combined for 57 points last season. So I think whether they realize it or not with Don Sweeney, like, this team will be rebuilding this year. Especially with the guys that they brought in. So let's kind of, Bruins fans, let's embrace a rebuild for once. It feels like they've been fighting the urge to do so for a long time. But yeah, this is going to be a Boston season that we really probably haven't seen in like well over a decade, I'd say.
Could they be worse? I don't think they could be worse than they were last year. Like, so much
No.
went wrong for
They were
them
really
last
bad, the
year.
offense,
I mean,
too.
they sold at the deadline, then kind of ethically tanked to
Yes.
a good spot in the lottery.
But I wonder if it's like, okay, we got Higgins. That's our stud for the future. Let's continue because you have David Pasternak. And if
Yes.
you're going to enter
Well,
a 5-year
it's going to be
rebuild-
healthy McAvoy,
Yes.
Yeah.
presumably healthy Hampus Lindholm, which goes very underrated, and Jeremy Swayman not signing like days before the season. So
100%.
there's reason to expect them to be good. But what a hot start we have here off the top. Anaheim, Boston, and now Buffalo we're getting into. Nowhere near contending in playoffs for me. Where, look, they've made some interesting additions. Like, I like Justin Danforth as a player. I like Michael Kesselring as a player. Josh Stone has some intriguing top 9 upside. But it's, you look at the moves and additions they've made, and it's like, this is the same team as it's consistently been, where J.J. Peterka's now gone. We don't know what's going to happen with Bowen Byram as we're recording this. And so, as much as you might like some individual players or some individual moves, you look at the totality of it, and it's still, this is probably the 7th or 8th team in the Atlantic Division. So ultimately, we'll see how things go. Like, I really like Kesselring as a player, but when you're shipping out JJ Peterka, who's an electric offensive player, it's like how much of a good top 4 big mobile right-handed defenseman is going to make up for what you're losing in Peterka. So overall for me, I still don't see the Sabres anywhere really contending in the playoffs at all, or even making the playoffs.
Yeah, I think if everything went right, they could make the playoffs. If Josh Norris stays healthy, if
which is a massive
Luukkonen and Devin Levi put together some decent goaltending, like maybe that could change. But Buffalo is definitely, they're not trending the right way, and I don't know if they're trending to be worse than they were. I don't think they necessarily will. But
I think they're becoming like more of a like complete team, but I think the ceiling is just so low on this.
Yeah.
They need their young players to really step up, and it's possible that can happen because of the amount of young players that they have there. But I need to see it before I believe it at this point.
I did like the Ryan McLeod extension. I feel like that'll be good
Sick
value
player.
in a couple of years.
Good player, great player. Calgary Flames, next team on this list.
Oh, convenient.
I always set myself
How
up
this
on this one. But can we pick a direction? They said, Conroy said in the mandate or something like that is that they want to rebuild while trying to make the playoffs.
Oh, just easy as that.
Yeah.
It's like, wouldn't that be glorious? Sounds like that's what the Boston Bruins are kind of trying to do as well. But it's just obviously just like not, I don't know, you can't do that. It just doesn't work. Like they have too many really, really good pieces, but not great pieces. They don't have anyone that's going to get them over the hump. There's no serious needle mover in this team. Like Nazem Kadri, Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar. If you have those 3 guys on your team, I don't really see you picking in the top 5. Like maybe you could get into the top 10. They obviously did get into the top 10 2 years ago. But if the young guys are improving like they're saying, like the best case scenario is 2-3 years from now, they're a wild card team. Like they're, or maybe a random player they pick in the teens. Like Hitson is great, but it's a big hope there. And I don't know. I think if you want to go for it, I mean, I guess you can hope that Connor McDavid wants to sign with you next year in summer or one of those other big UFAs, but that's not really the mantra of Calgary. They don't attract huge, big name free agents, or you got to make a trade. But how many of those guys even become available anymore? It just doesn't. You don't see that happen. Jack Eichel doesn't hit the trade market every year.
No.
And I personally think you got to tear it down. Doesn't seem like they're really allowed to do that in Calgary, but they definitely need to pick a concrete direction if the team does want to legitimately contend in the future.
It's a tough spot because there, as you mentioned, there's a certain floor that comes with having a goaltender like Dustin Wolf and having some of the veterans there and having these younger players coming into the lineup where you're right, the floor isn't this kind of top 5 range unless a lot goes wrong in a season. But then the ceiling is also like what it was this season where it's contending for a second wildcard spot. So it is a tricky spot.
They were only
Conroy.
the 3rd team ever to get 96 points in a season and not make the playoffs.
Which is pretty brutal.
But I mean, if they made the playoffs, like, okay, great. There's 2 games of home playoff revenue, but that's about all you're going to get from it. Like it's that team played at their absolute ceiling to hit 96 points. Maybe they can get 98, but they had like 17 comebacks this year. Like that doesn't happen again.
Now, is it maybe Conroy kind of playing the media and the fans a little bit, where it's like, we're going to try to make the playoffs. And the next thing you know, it's the 2026 draft. There's not a ton of teams that are like tanking. Like Pittsburgh's like one of the only teams that's on the downslope.
That's the interesting part.
Does Calgary get 10 games in and go, you know what? We're going to throw in the towel for this season.
But then you see the reports. They didn't do a lot so far to start the offseason, which is probably the right move. Yeah. But there was talk that they're really close to acquiring Keandre Miller, which makes no sense to me because they need to score goals. They don't need another stout defenseman. So I don't know. I think Conroy might be getting a little lucky that he's been striking out a little bit on some of these bigger ticket ads. But yes, you're right. Maybe he is just sort of like the lip service of, we're going to try to compete, so please extend your season tickets.
Exactly. Exactly.
Don't take a year off season tickets because we're going to be bad. Like,
and maybe like a message to the owner, like, we're trying to win.
We're trying. Oh, no, they didn't play very well. Like, fair enough. Next team on this list, though, the Carolina Hurricanes.
Speaking of Keandre Miller. So they land him, and the Carolina Hurricanes front office is never satisfied. Like, it's quite something what Tom Dundon, the owner, and Eric Tulsky, the GM, are doing as far as really, like, I know Tulsky has literally said this, that he's not going to rest until he has the 20 best players possible in his lineup. Obviously, that's a ridiculous thing to say because there's 32 other teams, but, like, it kind of seems like they're doing that. Like,
it's the right mantra to have.
It is. Like, they just keep upgrading, and they're very unattached to, like, you know, veterans that are about to move on. Brent Burns, Dmitry Orlov, thanks for your service. Moving on to bigger and better things. and they are so relentless in terms of acquiring draft capital. They like to trade down because that ends up helping them because they have a different draft list than everyone else. They pick a lot of Russians, a lot of undersized forwards. So I feel like they're almost playing a different game than everyone else when you look at the front offices and their strategies. And there's just a lack of satisfaction there. And to be fair, it's warranted where they haven't made a cup final in the Rod Brind'Amour era, even though they've been worthy of it to some extent. They've had on paper a team that should at least at some point make it there.
Extremely consistent.
Yeah, and they've always been looking for that superstar talent, and at this point in time, they don't have it because they don't have Mikko Rantanen, they don't have Jake Gensel, but they made a splash with K-Andre Miller. As we record right now, they're a front runner for Nick Ehlers, so maybe that's their, not a superstar splash, but star splash, and we'll see where that takes them because they're obviously one of those teams too where they're greater than the sum of their parts, right? So I don't know. I just find it fascinating how differently they operate than the average NHL team.
Yeah, they just chose a wrong time to be really good with the Florida Tampa. Just
seriously.
Yeah,
consistency.
that's fair.
Like they've just been like always the bridesmaid, never the bride in this Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and arguably the best move of July 1, the extension for Logan Stankoven.
Yes.
8 years, $6 million per, and that doesn't even.
Yours
shout
truly
out
broke
John
that
Matt,
right
yeah.
here. John Matisz had Stankoven.
And it doesn't even begin next season; it begins after next season.
Yeah.
So you think about one more season in that full Rod Brind'Amour system. He fits it so perfectly. He commits long term at a super reasonable number. That's going to look great in like 2 years' time, basically when that contract starts. Big fan of that move.
One team particularly quiet so far to start this offseason, the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, the front office is so that's for sure a little bit different than yours there. But I've got it's Gavin McKenna or not just bust, total bust. The Blackhawks. I need to find an extra word to get in there. It's Gavin McKenna or bust here for the Hawks. And I appreciate what they've done this offseason. I'll say that. It's not easy sitting around when you're one of the worst teams in the league. That's pretty much what the Blackhawks have done. Whether or not they're going to openly be like, yes, we're looking for Gavin McKenna next season, they're probably not going to come out and say that. But last year we saw what they tried to do. They brought in Tyler Bertuzzi, Tara Vinen, like Craig Smith, like some old guys, and obviously nothing happened to it. So I think this year they're like, okay, we'll take a different approach. Obviously a generational player's coming in the draft a year from now. We'll bring in, what was Burakovsky they brought in? He's like,
for him,
basically the only guy that they traded for. Let's give our young guys like Oliver Moore and Frank Nazar, Korchinski, obviously Bedard and stuff. Let's give them another season to develop, and then hopefully we land this generational prospect. So if that doesn't go according to plan, and maybe they win a couple extra games and don't finish in the bottom of the standings like they have for the last 3 years, that's really going to be an issue for the Hawks here. But, yeah, I think it's just a good season for them to kind of rebuild as a group, a little bit more synergy within, not bring in a bunch of, like, one-year rentals and old guys who aren't going to do anything. And Gavin McKenna.
Yeah. I have a question for you. You're a prospect guy. 3 years of picking in the top three. Bedard, Levshinov, Frindell. It feels a little uninspiring to me. After getting Bedard.
Yeah.
If you said you're getting Bedard and then 2 top 3 picks, you just imagine there's going to be a little bit more oomph there, right?
And we'll see how it plays out. Levshinov isn't the flashy guy like you could have got with Ivan Demidov, of course. But he looked good, especially as that second half of the season went along. Like, Levshinov is such an interesting player for me because, like, 3-4 years ago, he was playing Belarusian junior hockey. Like, his development has gone such a crazy way where he went from Belarus to USHL to Big Ten to AHL, NHL. Like, it's gone so fast for him that I think he's still catching up to it a little bit. I still think he's got top pairing upside. So it's one of those things where we kind of need to see him get comfortable a little bit. But Frondell is definitely a player where there's some questions about how much offense is actually there, and we'll have to see how that plays out as well. But certainly on paper, when you think about top 3 picks after Bedard, it isn't the flashiness that you maybe hope for, but it certainly could play out in the Blackhawks' favor, but there's some things that have to go right there.
You just compare the Chicago pool right now to the San Jose pool, and it's like on the other side, Celebrini, Misa, Will Smith, Dickinson. It just goes on and on.
And Dickinson was nowhere near a top 5 pick either.
No, and I mean, Chicago got Nazar and they got Korchinski. They had other top picks earlier on, and it just feels like Chicago isn't exactly doing it poorly, but it's it's very clearly not playing as well as it is in San Jose.
Certainly. Let's finally get to a good team, eh?
Yes, honestly, right? We need to get a string of them, hopefully.
The Colorado Avalanche here, and well, I say good team, but I'm going to go negative with this one. Please ignore the bottom six. We focus on the top six so much with the Colorado Avalanche, and rightfully so, and especially when you think about Gabriel Landeskog coming back and being re-added to that top six, Brock Nelson being extended. Finally, they have that second-line center figured out longer term since moving off from Nazem Kadri. Except you look at the bottom six, and it's Parker Kelly and Jack Drury, and Logan O'Connor's undergoing his second hip surgery in like 2 years. And you look at the depth pieces that they have coming along. You don't have a Cal Ritchie coming into the lineup anymore because you gave him up for Brock Nelson. And so, look, they're a great team. They're going to be a great team going forwards, but they got to figure out some depth pieces here, and whether that's finding some value free agents here the rest of the summer or having some younger guys maybe unexpectedly step into the lineup. As it stands right now, when you look at the Ross Coltons and Jack Drury's and Parker Kelly's, there's some fine pieces in the bottom six right now, but there's some holes still to fill in the bottom six, and they don't have a lot of cap room to figure it out.
Yeah, I think if they could bring in a really good 3C, it would change the opinion of a lot of people on that team. Obviously, it's a team that's done nothing since they won the Stanley Cup, but it is still a team that has Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar.
Exactly.
So there's some room for growth there. Next team on this list, the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I have them as hopefully we can stay healthy. Last year was an absolute win as a team. Like, they really rallied together as a group. They got pretty close to the playoffs. They didn't make it, but it felt good. Everyone was taking steps the right way. And this was a year where Sean Monahan missed almost half the year. Marchenko was playing with injuries. Werenski was playing with injuries. Like, if they can stay healthy, like, they could get at least 6 to 8 more points, which puts them in cleanly into a playoff spot. And in a weaker division too. I think there's a lot of room for this team to grow, but I think being healthy is very, very important because you just need those guys those other guys, the Monahans and the Marchenkos, and you just need that spread of wealth there because you haven't had Fantilli step up yet and be a 90-point player.
Yeah, I mean, I assume Don Waddell was pretty high on his own team because he was so aggressive before July 1. He got a lot of his work done before then. I wouldn't say all of it is impressive, but clearly he didn't want to be left empty-handed at, this poor UFA class, making a trade or two, getting Provorov re-signed. It seems like Waddell's okay, let's move this thing along. Is that the right approach in terms of some of those moves? Maybe not, but I mean, I think they're a team that last year showed that, the arrow's only pointing up.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens. And they also have, a bunch of prospects coming through. And, we'll see what type of, Calder buzz a couple of their guys get.
Yeah, they obviously really wanted Noah Dobson, but it's just they're kind of a very similar market to a Canadian team that's just it's harder to get guys from the outside in. Mm-hmm. So when you have guys inside, you have the Provorovs and the Dante Fabros, it's you got to just pay to keep them. Because if you don't, then you're going to give up more assets and have to overpay to get a guy who might be slightly better, slightly younger. You may as well just keep the guy you have and pay him a little bit extra to stay. Next team on this list, the Dallas Stars.
Yes. I'm going to go to the draft with the Stars here.
Love it.
Did Nil find a Stankoven 2.0? I think that's
definitely got to be more than 5.
Stankoven 2.0.
I put an A.
You put an A
I put
in
an
there,
A in there very foolishly. So that's Jim Nil, obviously the GM there, and Stankoven is Logan Stankoven. So Nil drafts Stankoven in the second round of 2021. He blossoms into this fantastic player in the AHL system, plays a little bit for the Stars, and then gets flipped in the Mikko Rantanen trade to Carolina, extended. We know that story. Cameron Schmidt drafted in the third round of this draft. What I find fascinating is that, one, he's of the same build as Stankoven roughly. Not very similar players, but similar players. And Dallas is so good at drafting and developing that I kind of trust their evaluation here. And Schmidt was a very popular, I guess, hipster choice to go, say, late first, early second. But NHL teams operate differently than people online. But I like that the Stars were we're going to try and, unearth another gem here. And we see a lot of the Stankoven traits in Schmidt. And we're gonna invest a draft pick in this kid.
It's so funny because with Schmidt, it was a very polarizing player going to the draft, but if Dallas or Carolina drafts Schmidt, everyone's like, "Oh, what a steal!" But if Nashville drafted this guy, everyone's like, "Oh, whatever." Right?
In over their
right?
heads.
Like it's
Maybe a little bit.
A
I don't
little
know.
bit.
With Cameron Schmidt and Dallas specifically here, Dallas, that was their first draft pick of the draft. So, look, you're at that point in the draft in the third round, taking your first selection. You need to take a swing as well. And on pure talent, on pure tools, on everything like that, this is a first round talent. He's just happens to be 5'8" and like 160 pounds. So when it comes to a player like him, I'm very high on him in terms of his upside. We'll see if he makes the NHL, but I love the shout out to Schmidt here as the just fantastic skater and shooter in the third round.
How many times have we seen undersized guys fall a little bit, and then they're elite? Like Cole Caulfield, Alex DeBrincat. Like it just keeps happening. Logan Stankoven, like
Lane Hudson.
Yeah, like it.
Cole Hudson.
I'd like to see how many times that happens before teams start to be like, maybe they're actually good.
It's just because, like, on top of that, though, there's also 50 other 5'9" or shorter guys that go in the later rounds of drafts.
You need to have elite traits to be able to make it. And I think Schmidt
he's got probably one of the coolest highlight reels in the draft.
So
pretty sick.
Completely honest. The Detroit Red Wings.
Detroit Red Wings. This is a team. What were my 5 words again? It was it's now or never. Simple as that. And I think
absolutely now or never.
It's absolutely now. Oh, man, I'm getting
Gotta
all
count to
off
5
with these
here.
5. Yeah, these are bad. It's absolutely now or never, which just kind of reiterates how much more important this season is than I think the rest. And honestly, nothing to me is as big of an indicator of that than that Mason Appleton deal they just got done. $3 million for 29-year-old Mason Appleton, where you know exactly what you're getting. Like there's no more ceiling for Mason Appleton. They are just trying to bulk up in whatever way possible to win this year. Obviously, I think Steve Yzerman is aware that this is probably his last season at the helm if they don't crack the playoffs. Second longest drought in hockey after having like the longest playoff streak in all of sports. They acquired John Gibson. They re-signed Patrick Kane. The Detroit Red Wings are as all in as it gets. Will they make the playoffs with what they've got? I don't know. I think I'm going to give them a fighting chance because they've at least been competitive the last couple seasons under this kind of new mandate where they're just kind of grabbing and going with different guys. I think obviously a better goalie certainly helps. But yeah, if they don't make the playoffs this year, I think Yzerman's job's as good as gone. So that's where I stand.
They
with the
need
Red Wings.
John Gibson to turn back the clock a little bit and stay healthy, which are the two big variables. But it's certainly possible for John Gibson. Like, we've been waiting forever for him to find a new home. And for a while, I think a lot of people thought it might be Edmonton that makes the move for John Gibson. He ends up going to Detroit. But for Edmonton here, after another cup final where they're significantly outplayed in net and there's questions all throughout the playoffs, for me, it's pretty simple. They need someone new in net. Yes. It doesn't have to be a top-end guy. It doesn't have to be some major move. I just think they need a new body in net just to give them a different flavor, a different option in net, because Stuart Skinner has his ups and his downs, but I don't think Cal Pickard has shown enough to be the quality of backup that you don't look to at least bring in a third option, because he's on a contract where you could waive him and send him to the minors if you needed to. He might get claimed, he might not. But when I look at his performance in the playoffs and look at his performance in the regular season, it's below average backup goaltender. And sure, he got some wins in the playoffs, of course. I don't think it was because of his play necessarily. So I just want to see somebody new in net for the Oilers. Could be a backup option, could be a star goaltender. Like, it doesn't really matter what level it is. I just want to see somebody different to give them a different flavor and a new option going into next season.
It's not a lot of people, like players left, the goalies left.
There's
on
not.
Like the free agency trade market. I've heard like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and names
but like,
of
for
others,
example,
but I just don't see them spending out on. They don't have the assets to go trade for a big name.
Certainly,
or the money really to do.
For example, the Sharks go out and get Alex Nedeljkovic, $2.5 million for a conditional third-round pick, I think it was. Like, that's the kind of move that I'm looking for. And there's going to be goaltenders available at some point. Hell, they could even wait until the season starts and maybe try to claim a guy on waivers or something like that. Like, I'm not talking about they need to go out and get a star goaltender, because that's just not realistic. I just want somebody different as an option, because goaltending is wild and you never know what happens. And I think running it back with the same couple of guys season after season, given the performances we've seen, I just want to see some new blood in there.
Speaking of running it back, the Florida Panthers are doing exactly that, and I have them as verge of a legit dynasty. Winning back-to-back is, you could argue that they already are kind of a dynasty. They're kind of a dynasty.
Not yet for me.
In the same way that, like, everyone kind of fought it when Chicago first got called the dynasty in their thing. But if you win 3 straight, that is absolutely
Cab era, 32 teams.
Completely. That is we haven't seen that in. What was the last team? A professional
Islanders.
team?
In the 80s.
But even any other North American pro sports teams, I don't even know the last time
I don't think
a
so.
team went 3 straight. We should do a little top shelf trivia on that
Hey,
one.
there you go.
But that would be incredibly impressive. Just the amount of toll on your body to do that, and the fact that they kept all 3 of their guys. I don't know who beats this team in a 7-game series. They were unbelievable in this year's playoff run. And, I mean, barring injuries and stuff, that's just a tough team to take down in the playoffs.
And this isn't a 1-year thing. This isn't like a last dance. They have 10 guys signed through 29, 30. 10 core guys, not like some guy where you're like, oh, they regret that. These are guys they want on their team. They're all obviously aging, as everyone does. But, Zito, I assume it was part of the pitch, was listen, look at our cap sheet. When I add you 3 guys, we're up to 10 skaters that are all here for the next 5 years. It's probably going to be a bloodbath after that in terms of what this team looks like. But nevertheless, it's not just, okay, if we don't three-peat, it's over. It's let's get back at it the next year.
Yeah.
All right, next up, the LA Kings.
Blue line bets better pay off.
Ooh.
I used a hyphen here,
Look at
which
that.
I thought was pretty clever.
Ken
Ken
Grammatically
Holland.
correct, too.
Yeah, there you go.
Well played.
Ken Holland, Cody Ceci, and Brian Dumoulin deals were overpays, and the main issue I have with them is the term. If you gave them just 1 year each and whatever cap number, and okay, let's fill our blue line out, but they're handcuffing themselves by adding term. I don't know how Holland didn't look over to the Dallas Stars and go, oh, this team did something with their blue line last offseason that they regretted with Lyubushkin and with Dumba, those 2 guys, where mid-season everyone's going, what were they thinking in July? And they're trying to offload them, and they're really up against the cap, and they've got no puck moving ability on the back end. That's literally what's going to happen with the Kings. I think it's pretty obvious. So there's that, and then the greater context is that their true need is some top 6, kind of juice, some an offensive catalyst, some creativity, because they're a very bland forward group once you get past Kempe and Byfield, Kopitar's a great player, but he's not creative. So anyways, I think that I actually like what they did with Perry and Armia and re-signing Kuzmenko. Those are fine, in a vacuum. But overall, I thought that Ken Holland just was very sort of tunnel visioned on improving the blue line and didn't think at all about the beyond next season.
Yeah, I'm sure he would have loved to pull in a big fish, but he couldn't, so he was I'm just gonna get all the old fish.
Mitch Marner or something,
I guess so.
Yeah, that was the big move that they were hoping for,
Yeah.
Mitch Marner, and obviously didn't get to that point. But yeah, I do like Brian Dumoulin, what he showed in the playoffs, if he can stay healthy and if he can continue that game. But it's 8.5 total for CC and Dumoulin,
And they already have Edmondson. It's and Doughty's getting older.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that back end beyond Clark and Mikey Anderson are a bunch of guys that are on the
and they moved out
downslope.
Jordan Spence too for minimal draft picks.
Yes.
It's looking a little weird in LA, but I mean they are.
That's a
still,
nice way to put it.
They are still a really good team. I
they'll
expect
make the
them to
playoffs.
be
And lose to Edmonton.
very
Exactly.
clearly top 3 in the Pacific Division this year. But it's just how is that team?
Clock is ticking.
How is that team?
For
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. They're getting older. They wanted Kopitar to feel like he was had more
what
time
I would
on
say
the
at this
runway,
point
basically.
is the gap is closing between them and Anaheim, for example.
100%.
And then you've got the Sharks who are hard charging in a
Yeah.
couple of years. So it's
Yeah.
Well, and they
it's
did
not
the
looking
whole
good.
retool while Kopitar and
Yep.
Doughty are still relevant. They did that, and props to them that they did something in that realm. But they might have missed their window for them to really capitalize on that, because I feel like Kopitar and Doughty.
They've also
you know,
missed on some picks.
So as we talked about it, Boston Bruins, Calgary Flames, that whole rebuild while trying to make the playoffs thing and
Yeah.
keeping your guys doesn't always
You're saying
work out.
watch
that well.
out, LA.
Yeah, except the only team that's really executed that well is the Dallas Stars, and that's because they landed Jason Robertson, Miro Heiskanen, and Jake Ottinger.
Yeah,
That'll help.
If you just
All in one
draft,
draft.
so,
So
all
Yeah,
stars.
yeah, if you just
you
get
have one
Yeah.
of the best drafts of all time.
yeah, it's crazy, and they still didn't get the best
And
player.
then you
in
get
that
Wyatt
draft, so-
Johnston,
Yeah.
2
All
years
right.
later.
Next team on this list, continue chugging along. We got to pick up the pace here a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, this one I can keep short and simple because I've got for the Wild, is this a real curse? It almost kind of just jumped out at us. It felt like after this year's first round loss that they have made the playoffs 8 of the last 10 years and they haven't gone further than the first round in all 8 of those years. They're playing in a very tough division still. Dallas, Colorado, and Winnipeg are all going to be maybe not the Jets. Dallas, Colorado are going to be really good for still a few years to come. And while the Wild have been a very solid team and they've got some really, really good players, like it's a team to be excited about, they just can't get over that hump. And I'm starting to wonder, like, it'll never be the same kind of curse as Toronto's had because the markets are completely different. But in terms of just what's on paper, it's the same deal. So what is it going to take for Minnesota to really get over that hump? I don't know. They obviously don't know either because this offseason they haven't done anything to change that. That's all I'm worried about this season coming up for them.
And a team that got over a hump this season was the Montreal Canadiens, getting into the playoffs
Good
here.
segue.
Thank you. And I love what they've done this offseason. Noah Dobson is a great pickup. But that 2C spot is still a bit of a question mark. So it's a great summer, but still need that 2C in terms of, is Kirby Dach that guy? Is he somebody that can stay healthy and can actually play in that lineup on a consistent basis? I love the pickup of Zach Bolduc, trading from an area of strength now at right defense to pick up a guy who immediately becomes a really intriguing top 9 winger for them. And so you've got a full season of Demidov here. You've got that top line that is really gelled into one of the better lines in the NHL based on what we saw down the stretch there from Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, and Juraj Slafkovsky. So I love the pickup of Dobson to really solidify that blue line. I like what they're building methodically at forward. Still some question marks about that 2C spot, but I love what Kent Hughes has done in terms of being patient, not giving out these big contracts on July 1st that they ultimately regret, but making some moves in terms of adding some guys that fit with the team's age group. So I really like what Kent Hughes has done, but that 2C spot, still some question marks.
And I think they can afford to be patient on that. They don't. This isn't a team that needs to compete for a Stanley Cup next year. They're not like their cap situation's only going to get better as these older guys from the last core
and they've absolutely gotten better this season too.
Yes, and I think if they go in without a 2C this year and they don't solve that situation in the season, I think it's not the end of the world. But if they go into it maybe next summer they're like, oh, Patrick Laine's contract's off the books. Maybe we could pursue I don't even know who's top of my head here, but like
insert player here.
Insert player, and that player can then step in, or maybe it's 2 years down the road. Like this team's real window is like 2027 and on to actually contend for a cup.
Yeah.
Yes, you want to make the playoffs every year.
Yep.
But in terms of contending for a cup, they're still a few years away from that because they're going to need their young guys to just get more playoff experience. So if you're going to bring in that, we talked about it earlier, and like how sometimes GMs rush it with like that move. I think Kent Hughes has made only good moves basically since he went to Montreal. I think Habs fans should be very okay with the fact that if he kind of pumps the brakes a little bit here and just lets things play out a little bit.
The last thing I say to that point is this is the last season to experiment with Kirby Dach as that 2C. He's still young enough, still talented enough to earn that spot, but this is his last kind of shot to do so.
100%. Okay, next team, Nashville. My 5 words are, last year was a blip. Now, this isn't necessarily what I believe. This is, I think
this Barry Trotz's
Barry
quote?
Trotz believes that last year was a blip. And on the surface, I'm like, okay, yeah, they still have Stamkos and Forsberg, and I mean, they didn't trade Marchessault. Like, they brought in Eric Holla. They kind of firmed up their defense with Nick Hague. Like, they are, I think, betting on the fact that last year was a blip, and they're saying it also makes the Brady Martin pick make a little bit of sense to me because you're like, oh, maybe this is a guy that can slide in 12 months from now and be a playoff impactful forward right away. Not just a guy that like has maybe one day can be a lead our team, just a guy we can just wrecking ball in our top 6 in 12 months or whatever it is, or next year in the playoffs, because their core is old, but their core in theory is good enough in a weird Western Conference to contend for a wild card spot.
In theory, doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
Yes, I think that they could play like they will probably live to regret a lot of these moves that they're making, but provided they don't give up a lot of their futures, I think it's fine because they have invested a crap ton of money into some of these older guys, and it's hard to just tell your owner like, oh yeah, all that money you just paid, we're gonna now like trade those guys and retain half the money for second round picks and third round picks because you're not getting a lot for those
after
guys
buying out Matt Duchene and having the Ryan Johansson
100%,
stuff.
Yeah, and for all those state tax experts out there, Nashville has a very favorable state tax situation.
Here we
and
go,
they're giving
John.
out some pretty
Here
bad
we
contracts.
go.
So, Yeah, you don't necessarily get a discount if you go to those states, right? Okay, so I'll transition to my team.
What a segue that was.
Oh,
eh?
let's go.
The New Jersey Devils.
Oh,
Don't know
bro.
what the tax situation is in the New Jersey favor.
Not a good one.
I was going to say definitely not.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so we're swinging back to the other side of things. So with New Jersey, I feel like we're still waiting for another shoe to drop here. As far as
Added in a word there.
what do we got? Waiting for shoe to drop.
another shoe to drop.
Because we've got we've got Luke Hughes is still in RFA. I don't see any issues there. But what does that number come in at? What is the length of the contract? How much do they try to invest in him to get that dollar down? And then also they made some improvements up front. They brought in not brought in Jake Allen. They re-upped Jake Allen over 5 years, $1.8 million, hilarious contract. But I just wonder, like, they're a team that, they made that big splash with Timo Meier, and it didn't quite work out. It hasn't been a disaster, but it certainly hasn't been a rousing success. I feel like they're a little gun shy right now of making that next splash. But they got Seamus Casey there, just sitting there as a right-handed defenseman who has a ton of potential. But is he part of their future with their blue line constructed the way it is, and with guys coming through the ranks? So I wonder, with Casey being there and their need for maybe a top 6 impact player, is there a deal to be made in the offseason here? And to go back to your point with the Metro Division, like, it's right there for the taking. Obviously Carolina is a very good team, but like
Wide open after that.
Yeah, like there's a spot for New Jersey, and they can't sort of just sit there idly.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like, would you guys agree that Quinn Hughes is going to be a Devil? Like, it's just...
Eventually, yes.
Yeah.
Luke Hughes offer sheet coming in from
Oh
Vancouver.
my gosh, it's just...
He's-
I don't know. I feel like that's going to happen there. Let's just keep chugging along here and do the other New York teams, the New York Islanders.
Yeah, New York Islanders. My 5 words are a rebuild you dream about. What a spot for the Islanders to be in. How often do you miss the playoffs by 8 and 9 points? You've been in the playoffs 5 of the last 7 years. And all of a sudden, you have 3 picks in the top 17 picks, including the first overall. I like what they did with Noah Dobson, give themselves a bit more cap space to be a little bit flexible. They got a decent player back in return to, was it Heineman?
Yeah. Heineman.
Who I think can contribute right away. But you just look at the foundation of this team. They've got Matt Barzal. They've got some solid players here. And then they have another wave who will almost probably come up while those guys are kind of getting to the end of the line. And you're just going to have a crazy ball of, like, I don't even know, talent in New York with Schaefer, Aitchison, Eklund. They also just happen to have, Richie that they got. Like, this is a really exciting team and a team to be excited about. I don't know how the timelines are going to line up, given the fact that some of these guys are getting to the end of the road here. But nonetheless, like, you're basically giving yourselves a chance to make the playoffs now and probably for the next, 5-10 years. So they're in a really, really good spot. They basically didn't have to tank at any point. They that's what happens when you fall into the first overall pick the way they did. But yeah, if you're an Islanders fan, exciting time for sure.
Let's get a bit bold with this next one. Best pairing in the NHL ? For the New York
very
Rangers after the signing of Vladislav Gavrikov. We assume that he's going to be the long-term partner now for Adam Fox. How many defense pairings in the NHL have arguably the best pure defensive defenseman in the NHL alongside a Norris Trophy caliber defenseman who has literally won one? Not like theoretically Norris Trophy caliber, literally Norris Trophy caliber. I think there's 2 pairings that I put up in this kind of realm. Matisz Ekholm with Evan Bouchard, and I think the number 1 pairing still in the NHL, Devon Toews with Cale Makar, just because of that absurd upside there. But for me, I look at the defensive value that Gavrikov brought last year on the LA Kings, stepping up in a big way without Drew Doughty early in the season, and over the course of the entire season, putting up some of the best pure defensive metrics in the NHL, and stepping alongside somebody like Adam Fox, who is not a player that he's ever played alongside in terms of a player of his caliber. And this also frees up Fox to be more of this offensive creator, jump up more in the game. I'm really excited to see what this can do. I'm really excited to see what this does for Adam Fox's future Norris Trophy votes going forwards. But in terms of pure, just looking at one pairing in the NHL, I think it immediately becomes a top 3 pairing in the NHL, at least, if not higher.
I like that.
Rangers are fascinating right now because they could be a President's Trophy caliber team or they could miss the playoffs.
As we've seen literally the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, but obviously it's not a bold thing to say, but I think legitimately going into this year they could be unbelievable, but they could also really struggle. The Ottawa Senators, who's going to score goals? This is a team that made the playoffs last year and scored less goals than the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that's
a good stat.
Yikes.
They were almost just outside the bottom 10 in goals per game, and obviously Dylan Cousins helped with that a little bit down the stretch, and maybe you can get a little bit more from Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle, but I don't know if Claude Giroux's really doing it anymore. I think they're still maybe missing I don't know if Batherson's good, but I'm just like, is there a true
one more guy?
One more guy, and they need maybe some internal growth can be that. But all the picks they've missed on is really hurting this team now as you look at them. They've just missed on so many of those top picks over the years during their rebuild that they're just a little bit away from truly being a legitimate contender. And in such a tough Atlantic division, I just don't see how they could really contend with this core.
It was funny to see Claude Giroux took the hometown discount to come back because he liked what they were building. And I was like, this is a guy who's legacy's on the line with if he wins a cup, and for him to do that, maybe he's going to be the guy to turn around and score 30 this year. But yeah, it's a tough spot.
They need someone to step up as that next scorer.
Yep. Philadelphia Flyers, Giroux's old team.
Word cut out.
That segue, boys.
That's
nice.
Great
Look at that one.
segue.
Clean and easy.
That was very good.
Now it's not clean.
Now it's not because we're talking about it. Word cut out for Rick Tocchet. Oh, added a word there. Sorry, Rick. So where I'm coming from with this is that the Flyers had an absolutely abominable goaltending situation last year, by far the worst in the league, something like .870 save percentage. And this was under John Tortorella for most of it. It's not like the Flyers were a complete disaster defensively. It was mostly the goaltending. So Tocchet gets a new goalie. You've got Samuel Ersson already there. And then he's bringing in Dan Vladar. Well, his boss is. So, you've got an upgrade, but that's not necessarily a home run. Vladar has never played, a ton of games. Obviously has shown promise over the years, but you're not bringing in the next Dominic Hasek or something. So,
hot take.
Yeah, hot take. So, with Tocchet, I just feel like, training camp, he's going to be really drilling in on, insulating the goalies, trying to limit the high danger chances. And because I don't know, he just seems also like the type of head coach that it would drive him insane to have a poor goalie.
Well, Trevor Zegras is really going to help with that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, with the Flyers, my mind goes to Tocchet and how he handles an upgrade in goal, but only a minor one.
I think if you show Rick Tocchet Gavin McKenna highlights, I think he'll be okay with some of the goaltending.
Yeah, that is actually fair.
Yeah, okay. The Pittsburgh Penguins, who definitely are looking at a lot of Gavin McKenna highlights right now.
Yes, Pittsburgh Penguins, man, what a spot for them to be in. I've got the Big Three's toughest season yet, or hardest season. I completely butchered that there. But, last season we saw how bad things really got for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and it's crazy for this team to be as bad as they are with one of the best players of all time being on the team, one of the best trios of all time with Malkin and Letang. And this is going to be a real struggle for them. For Pittsburgh, it's going to be tough. They're probably going to be battling trade allegations all year or surrounding these three guys who are Hall of Fame players in Penguins history. So I'm really, really kind of nervous to see how this goes because we're already seeing Sidney Crosby trade talks getting stirred up. He's trying to shut them down, but if I'm him, I might want to get out because this team is headed in the furthest direction from the right one. They tried to emulate what Washington did with the retool, and that's gone nowhere. So they're going to be tanking hard, and when you're tanking hard with some of the best players of the last generation on the team, it just really doesn't sit well for me.
It feels to me Crosby's going to see how this season goes, and then maybe it's next summer he's going into the last year of that deal, and maybe it's the last year ever. And he goes, okay, I'm going to go play with Nate McKinnon, or I'm going to go to Montreal because they're now in a spot to contend for a cup, something like that. Maybe that'll be too soon.
How about that for a 2C?
Yeah, exactly. There's your second-line center, 38-year-old Sidney Crosby. That'd be something. But yeah, the Penguins, they're, I discussed a little bit before, they're maybe the only team in the NHL that's, definitively going in this direction. Everyone else is at least trying to go in this direction. The Ducks, Blackhawks, Sharks. They're not going to be good teams, but they're trying to add little steps along the way here. So, yeah, lots of losses in Pittsburgh.
I'm nervous.
So let's talk about the Sharks here because, my point was they need to reach the cap floor, and they did that just before we started recording here. $6.5 million for 2 years for Dmitry Orlov and claimed Nick Leddy off waivers gets them at least serviceable veterans on the blue line, which they didn't have last season. Gives them a better floor in terms of being in more games over the season. I don't think Orlov, Klingberg, Letty, any of those guys make them a good team by any means, but it's an upgrade over last season, and it sends them in a direction that they're trying to go, which is just give some more veterans around the likes of Celebrini and such that can get them to the puck more consistently, so that they're not playing as much of the game in just like 8-0 blowouts and things like that. So I like the moves in terms of short term, just make the team a little bit more fun, some more puck moving ability and such, and it reaches the cap floor, which they needed to do.
Another West Coast team, the Seattle Kraken. Vegas made it look easy. This
Yes,
team
they did.
has drafted a lot of centers, and Matty Beniers had a great Calder season, and then has kind of turned into more of a defensive 2C. And Shane Wright's yet to take a massive step. And I mean, maybe Berkeley Catton and Jake O'Brien could be good, but I mean, they brought in Ryan Lindgren for 4 years. I don't hate the contract, but I just don't really know what the ceiling is on this team unless Catton or Jake O'Brien really pop. And even if they do, they've got 4 centers down the middle of the ice, and you want to build your team through the middle of the ice, but you also need defensemen. Their top defensive prospect is Riker Evans.
And he's an NHLer now, so
he's
I don't
an
know
NHLer,
if he
and I don't think he's really got like top pairing upside either. Maybe
I think he could be a top 4 guy.
Yeah, top 4 guy. I think he's got. But it's like they've had all these top picks. You think they would have spent something on a defenseman at some point?
Have not drafted a defenseman in the first round, still in the franchise's history.
Maybe that Carolina mandate of only forwards or something like that. But yeah, Seattle, they definitely saw what Vegas did and said, like, oh, this is going to be fun, and it has yet to be very fun for Seattle.
Let's go to the St. Louis Blues. So I just see breakout candidates everywhere on this NHL roster. So that's going to be my topic du jour here with St. Louis. And you know, obviously they have the Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou sort of tier, if you will, and they're in their late 20s. I still think they have room to grow, but it's the guys below them. Dylan Holloway, Logan Mailloux, who they just acquired from Montreal, Philip Broberg, Alexei Toropchenko, Jimmy Snuggerud, Dalibor Dvorsky, who's on his way up. Like, I just see a lot of guys in their early 20s that could pop off, and if they all, you know, sort of start leveling up together, suddenly we look at St. Louis a little more seriously in terms of cup contending. Obviously, they have a pretty high floor with what they have in their lineup. They looked really good in the playoffs despite, you know, not going very far. So, and then I pair that also with their drafting of Justin Carbonneau, where I think they took a kind of a swing, if you will, on a high upside guy. And I just like what they're doing there as far as refilling, you know, backfilling sort of the teenage pipeline. But then they're obviously out there looking for early 20s players and did so with Mailloux. They make that trade with Montreal where Bolduc is going out the door. Bolduc would have been another breakout candidate. He had a fantastic end of last season. But with Mailloux, they're sliding him right into the top 4 on defense, and they're really high on him. They were asking Montreal for him all season. So we'll see what happens. Like, they're giving these guys a lot of ice, I guess is a good way to put it too. So that obviously helps with breaking out.
They're also doing the rebuild while trying to make the playoffs thing, and it kind of worked because their top end pieces that we were talking about in Boston and Calgary, like the older guys, aren't actually all that old.
Yes.
Robert Thomas, Colton Parayko, Jordan Kyrou, all these
Parayko's
guys
on the older side.
He is, but they're all still relatively in their prime, and they're freeing up spots for these young guys, and they're doing a good job drafting.
One guy I missed was Hofer.
Yes.
So the goalie. Obviously he's behind Binnington, but they re-signed him to avoid an offer sheet. So like there's literally like 8 guys where I'm like, if this guy levels up, you know, St. Louis is going to look a little bit better.
That guy, Justin Carbonneau, they drafted, St. Louis posted a pretty sick highlight
from
Dev Camp.
Oh,
his body
Dev Camp highlights.
So nasty.
There's a lot of questions about his motor, but if they get his defensive motor going, that's a player that could be a top line winger, I think, in the NHL. Next team on this list, the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Tampa Bay Lightning. I've got life as Florida's little brother. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if they've been Lil Bro'd before by the Panthers, but that's what's going on, and might have a bit of an identity crisis. Who knows? But it's certainly a kind of a turning of a new page here in the era that we're in. Obviously, the Florida Panthers are incredible, and Tampa Bay Lightning have been bowing out to them. So I'm interested to see where they go. I still think my other one for them was going to be like way too good to fail, because I think this Lightning team is still very solid. The Leafs take a step back this season, so that might open up the door for at least these two to maybe not meet until the second round with the Panthers. But yeah, this is a new era of hockey where the Tampa Bay Lightning aren't the best team in the state of Florida, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes for them.
In terms of unfinished business, Isaac Howard is still
They
Tampa
gotta
Bay
figure
Lightning
that out,
property,
yeah.
and Julian Breezewell has basically said, like, the teams that Howard wants to sign with, we can't work a deal out with, and the teams that are ready to work a deal out with us, he doesn't want to sign with them. So we'll see what happens with this game of chicken, but they do have that asset in their back pocket to potentially add maybe a young NHL or even draft picks. I mean, this is a team that has really struggled to go to the draft stage because they've been so competitive for so long.
No team was a bigger victim of the flat cap than the Tampa Bay Lightning. They just lost all. I mean, obviously Toronto was too. I still smirk.
Thanks for
over
ruining my
there.
segue.
But the Tampa Bay Lightning's flat cap, like they just lost so many guys over and over again. And while guys took discounts to stay, they didn't take discounts to stay like they did in Florida.
No.
Yeah, you're right.
And now they're trying to reunite all those guys. It's just hilarious. They brought Gord back.
Right.
I wonder if Palat or maybe Blake Coleman could be a target.
Killorn slips
for
back there.
them or something like that. But I mean, you can't write Tampa off.
No.
Like they're so good offensively. It just obviously didn't. They need to
The
not.
top
play.
of their lineup is unbelievable.
They need to stay away from Florida in the first round, 100%. They need to get to the other side of the bracket or something.
They got to stay away from Big Bro.
Yeah. Toronto Maple Leafs.
Could you imagine this lower third 3 years ago, though?
Oh my gosh.
After the run that Tampa went on,
Yeah,
anyways, that's
seriously.
crazy. All right, the Toronto Maple Leafs, who certainly have not been talked about enough over the past month and decades and etc. Look, the core four era is officially over.
Wait,
I added
really?
in,
Really?
I added in an extra word there, but it's officially done. Mitch Marner's out of town. John Tavares took a discount to stay in town. I think the main takeaway here is that it's a damn shame that things ended the way it did for Mitch Marner, where Toronto-born kid, a bit of an underdog type pick, all the local boy stuff, comes in and is one of the fun young players on this team that when kind of this era was started, it wasn't necessarily if they win a cup, but necessarily how many they were going to win. And the way that things played out, the vitriol that ended up coming on, the just everything that played out from both sides. And I think the Leafs and the way that they handled things, the way that the Marner camp handled things, the way that fans reacted to things, I think all of it turned into this like first percentile worst case scenario that could have possibly played out for Mitch Marner, because we should be talking about this Toronto-born player that finishes his career as a career-long Maple Leaf and the franchise's all-time leading scorer, and instead we're looking at him celebrating in Vegas with these weird promo videos and in their offices and such. And it's a great fit for him in Vegas. I think he's going to excel there. But I think my big takeaway here is less about what the Leafs look like going forward, what Marner looks like in Vegas, but more so disappointment for how all of this played out for Mitch Marner and the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, it's insane. Like even like years ago, people started flirting with the ideas of like breaking up the core four, obviously, but you just thought like if and when the core four would get broken up, it would be in like a really proper move, like in a thing to make
it wouldn't be the
team.
player breaking up with the
No,
team.
it would be the team making a move to make the team better. And now it's got to a point where it's like they lost a 100-point player, like this kid that should have been, that's like got posters and ads all over the city and in the GTA, and how many kids around the GTA have his jersey and stuff. And now it's like, oh, like it stinks.
He's the one.
And the other
I get
thing-
Snapchat videos of my buddies on his lake driving by his cottage in their boat, flipping off the cottage because they're just like, like it's just.
But like that's what it got to.
That's what it
That's
got
what
to.
it
Like,
got
how
to.
did we get
He got
here?
dehumanized.
Yes.
Like he was just like literally people throwing like tomatoes at him. Like he's
Almost
it
quite
got
literally,
bad.
like the last game of the season, like beers were being thrown
Yeah.
on the ice and jerseys and all of that. And I think the biggest thing for me that is the biggest shock out of all of this is if you go right back to the beginning when John Tavares signs that contract on July 1st, whatever year it was, 2018 or
Yeah,
whatever
2018.
year it was. When you go back to that day and you say, okay, eventually the core four era is going to end, who's the most likely one to leave? Mitch Marner's probably bottom of that list.
Yep.
That day when that contract is signed. John Tavares might retire at some point, and that breaks up the core four era. Austin Matthews, he's not from Canada. William Nylander at that time was the most common trade guy, and he
Whipping
was
boy,
an RFA and
yeah.
all of that. And it's, like I said off the top, it's a damn shame the way that things played out for Mitch Marner. I think it's good for everybody that this is over now and we can move on. Obviously, moving on will take some time because there's going to be return games and all of that's going to happen. But at least looking at the Core 4 era being over and just this statement here, I think it's more about looking in the rear view as to how we got here instead of looking ahead to how these two new teams look going forward.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to be staying up for those West Coast games at the start of the year. And the Olympics are going to be really interesting with when Marner's playing for Team Canada.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it'll be a fun topic all year long.
Fun depending on perspective.
Yes. The Utah, fun for us because lots to talk about, lots to write about, lots and all that stuff.
Oh, yes.
The Utah Mammoth, time to make the playoffs. This is a team that I think is right there. They are absolutely right there. The wild card spots in the West are wide open, and they've made a great move, I think, bringing in Peterka. I think they really wanted Ekblad. I think he would have slid really well into their the defense. I think they might still have one more move in them. They've got a lot of assets they could give up to maybe make a move to upgrade their defensive core or even their bottom six. But I think it's time for the Utah Mammoth to really make their mark in the NHL. And I feel bad for Arizona Coyote fans who really they created this, right? The Coyotes, this is basically 95% Coyotes development.
Oh, like 99%.
Yeah, except for Peterka.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What a winner Bill Armstrong is here, where
yeah.
he goes from an owner that won't let him do anything, an owner that lets him do whatever he wants, and he's looking pretty smart. Even I love the acquisitions of Brandon Tanev and Nate Schmidt. Both I think it's pretty obvious that they're both high character guys, and they're both very useful in sheltered roles. Like Brandon Tanev, everything you want in a fourth liner in 2025. Nate Schmidt brings the fantastic vibes, just won a cup, and puck moving, skating, good hockey sense. He didn't it's kind of like Ken Hughes. He made moves, but you don't look at any of them and go, oh, he got a little selfish or a little, bold here. He made the right moves.
100%.
I think if they have a fully healthy defense last year, they make the playoffs. John Marino missed a bunch of time. Sean Durzi missed a bunch of time. They had to kind of rejig their defense on the fly last season and still were fairly close to making the playoffs. I think they're a shoo-in for a playoff spot here. And then they have two wild cards as well with the KHLers coming over and Simashev and Neil Boo.
Yeah.
Those guys could be impact players right away, or they could take 3-4 years. I have no clue what to expect from them.
Same with Iginla too. It's a top 10 pick that they drafted last year.
Hasn't played in 2025.
So who knows? Their team could be a really, really fun one to watch.
And we talked about this last show about their fourth overall pick being potentially available. They kept it. I thought that was the right move.
Yep.
They get Desnoyers. Again, another check mark for Bill Armstrong and what he's building.
A couple years from now, that'll be such a formidable top six, and that'll be a fun team to watch. Poor Arizona Coyotes fans. Yeah. But speaking of fans that must be sad, the Vancouver Canucks. They suck.
All right.
Wow. The fans are the team.
Yeah, the team. Nothing against the fans.
Can Core keep Quinn around? Did I have the?
Bang.
Look at the alliteration this guy's throwing around today.
It's hard to remember these 5 words, the exact words. So Quinn Hughes is obviously the Quinn there, and the core. Thatcher Demko is coming back long term. Karna Garland, and we have one other player, Brock Besser. So, it's tough, right? Because they've already traded JT Miller, so the core is worse than it was 12 months ago. But then you start thinking about Elias Pettersson bouncing back. I didn't like the Evander Kane acquisition in terms of the price and everything involved in it, what they paid. But I guess he's, an addition to their top 9. I don't know. I see the Canucks and I go high floor, low ceiling. And if I'm Quinn Hughes, maybe just the familiarity with that group and, having a chance to win is enough to re-sign when he's eligible next July. But also, there's a reason why I put a question mark there where does Quinn look around and go, is this really what you're trying to do to keep me around? And that's no offense to, Thatcher Demko, who could have a massive season coming up if he's healthy. This guy's a top 10 goalie when he's not hurt.
He could be the starter for Team USA at the Olympics.
Yes. Yep. And I like the Brock Besser contract in terms of the actual dollars spent.
At the end of the day, this is a team that everything went wrong for last year, and they had 90 points.
Yeah.
Right? So they're a couple wins away from still being a wild card team. Obviously, a lot of the season, JT Miller was a part of that, and he was a big part of a lot of their wins.
Yeah,
but
they need a second-line center at
yes,
this point.
obviously. I can't believe they let Pius Suter go for $4 million.
That was crazy.
But, we good? Vegas?
Yeah, Vegas. This is probably my favorite one that I came up with. Vegas, get rich or die trying.
Nice.
one of my
it.
favorite all-time 50 Cent album. But basically, I think with the Vegas Golden Knights is they got that taste of the cup right out the gate, and ever since they're like, oh, we need more. And year in and year out, they bring in the big fish. They get Jack Eichel, they get Mark Stone, Thomas Hertl, Pietrangelo, like the list goes on. And now they get Mitch Marner. You just assume at some point after taking all of these swings at all of the big names, they're going to fizzle out and they're not going to have the ability to keep doing it. And what do? Like they get by far and away the biggest free agent of this offseason. So until I don't really know until they're this run that they've had of like elite players coming in runs out, like they're just going to continue to add and add and add. We'll see what happens with they're trying to soften the little loophole that the Golden Knights coined themselves, it feels like. So we'll see what happens with that. But I mean, this is a team that like year in and year out feels like for the next at least 5 years too, like they're just going to continue to contend. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if they slip another cup in there in the next little bit.
I mean, the free agents are always going to want to sign in Vegas.
Yeah.
They just might never be a draft and develop team. And with the cap going up, that might just become the reality of the NHL. Is There's draft and develop teams.
Let everybody else
and
draft and develop.
Spend all your money on the players other teams develop. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, alrighty. From a team that is consistently we expect to be at the top to a team that surprised last year in the Washington Capitals, was last season a fluke. Going into last season, even though they made the playoffs and everyone was like, they had a great summer, we dropped them out of the playoff picture. And instead, they completely flip the script and go out and be the top seed in the Eastern Conference. And I think the playoffs kind of played out the way everyone expected, where they look good against Montreal for the most part and then fizzle out in the second round. Was last season a fluke built around the excitement of Alex Ovechkin and a first season of Pierre-Luc Dubois and the success of their goaltending and Jacob Chychrun looking good and all these pieces that they brought in really kind of finding their groove and excelling? Alexei Protas having this big breakout season. How much of that repeats? How much of that improves? How much of that regresses to the mean? All of those coming together. Is this a team that is going to contend atop the East again? Is this a team that is going to be battling for the second wild card? I could see either of those scenarios happening again. And as we mentioned earlier, the Nick Ehlers question mark is still out there. If they land him, I think that changes the flukiness going into next season again by adding a big piece there. I like what they've done in terms of, as we've kind of mentioned throughout this episode, rebuilding on the fly in terms of taking these high upside draft picks, in terms of a Cole Hudson looking great and Andrew Cristall being a guy that could step into the lineup next season, guys like that. But at the end of the day, the NHL roster is the focus point. And was it a fluke? Because I think a lot of us all season last year was like, this is kind of fluky. Like, what is this team really? And I think going into next season, if they do it again, then it's not a fluke. But I think, at least for me still, I'm still undecided and unconvinced of this Washington Capitals team, which is a little bit crazy to say after they were literally the top seed in the Eastern Conference last season.
I wish there was a way to quantify the vibes in that locker room all last season.
Yeah.
Like if you could put it on a piece of paper and be like, the goal chase all season and then being like the hot team in the league, that added 10 points to their season.
Yeah.
Number
honestly,
one vibes team in the league last year. Easily.
Far and away, and it really did contribute to them winning so many games. And they're going to take a step back this year. I would almost say for sure. And people are going to be wondering why. It honestly just might be the spirit in the locker room.
Yeah. No, and I think they should still have a really good shot to make the playoffs. They are a they're a very good team, honestly. They might not be a great team. They might not be a cup contender, but they're building the right way. It's just the question, I think, with them is, like, what is the actual ceiling as a team?
Wide range of outcomes for this team.
100%. Last team on this list, we'll finish up here, the Winnipeg Jets. Is this the last dance?
Woo! Good way to end it.
Kyle Connor is a pending UFA, as are 11 other players on their roster, and a couple RFAs. Dylan Sandberg's a pending UFA. Cole Perfetti's pending RFA. I'm honestly worried about the Winnipeg Jets because with the cap going up, like they don't have a ton of money in that market to really like spend to the limit to compete with everyone. They're obviously gonna have to overpay to keep guys like Connor and these guys around because that's just the reality of Winnipeg as a market. But I don't know how they really could survive a true out-and-out rebuild. And I think this core definitely is good enough to be top 3 in the Central, but they've never shown that they're good enough to compete for a cup, really. Like, they just haven't gotten there. And obviously the guy that's held them back just won a Hart Trophy and his another Vezina, and that's Connor Hellebuck. But my question is this the last dance for Winnipeg?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define last dance, because you're still going to have Hellebuck and Scheifele, like they're locked up long term. But a lot of those other players, Ehlers is a guy who's on his way out, right? Like that's a guy who's been there forever. And yeah, does Kyle Connor smell, some dollar bills come July 1? Maybe. Like he's going to be a hot commodity, and maybe he's an American. Maybe he wants to go somewhere else. I don't know. Jets fans, please.
Yes.
please hold off.
I hope Connor stays in Winnipeg. I really do, because I think they're a fun team to watch. I just think it's tough to keep all of your players. So you look at every Canadian market, and they've all lost their guys, right? Like Toronto just lost Marner. Like Calgary lost Tkachuk and Gaudreau. Like it just happens. And with Winnipeg, it's like, can they survive losing a Kyle Connor? Like.
And to that point, like we talk so much about contract efficiency and things like that, but for a team specifically like Winnipeg, when you have those guys, you need to pay to keep them. And I don't really care what the number comes in for a guy like Kyle Connor. If you want to be a competitive team long term, you need to pay up for a guy like that. So I'm fascinated to see how that and Dylan Sandberg and a lot of those guys play out. Because I don't think I would go as far as saying it's the last dance, because you've got guys, as you mentioned, Scheifele, Hellebuck, Josh Morrissey seems like a guy who's going to be there a long time. You've got that kind of core there. But when you have, as you mentioned, so much of the supplementary pieces around that, as pending free agents or pending RFAs. I like what they've done in the draft a little bit to maybe supplement that coming forward in the future. But you're right, it's not a team that's going to be going out in July on 1 and getting the top free agents, or is it a team that we've seen literally in the last year has had trouble signing a collegiate guy and have to trade him and figure out some stuff in terms of the prospect pool as well. So there's a lot playing against the Winnipeg Jets. They need to pay to keep their guys to go forward. So I'm fascinated to see how this one plays out, because you're right, where the amount of free agents they have going forwards, it's not something I realized before today.
It would be so massive for them if they could get Connor extended this summer, even if it costs them $13 million a year. Just do it, because
how do you replace him?
You can't replace him, because nobody of that caliber is signing as a free agent in Winnipeg. No offense, Winnipeg. That's just history.
It's the reality.
That's just how it works. Other teams will pay up to the same number that you'll pay for those guys, and also just the money there is tough to make work as well. That's 32 teams, and that's 5 words and a lot more on all those 32 teams. But that was a lot of fun, as was this entire year of Top Shelf, fellas. We a lot of shows we went through, and so big thanks to our producers Adrian and Zach, who've been with us.
Bravo.
The entire time. They have crushed it, doing graphics and running the cameras and editing and stuff, while we just get to sit up here and
our dumb spelling mistakes, etc. Yes,
we just get to sit here and talk hockey. It's a lot of fun, but it has been a lot of fun this year, fellas, and thank you guys all for tuning in throughout the year. We may be back maybe for a weird episode in the summer if we're feeling it.
We'll figure things out.
But
it's a good tease. It's a good tease.
We will be back for sure in the fall with more Top Shelf content. We'll be following along, but you can follow John and Kyle on Twitter. They've got lots of stuff coming out there, as well as their articles on The Score. Me and Levi post some videos as well, sometimes about hockey. We'll see how much hockey there's to talk about this summer. Hasn't exactly been an electric offseason so far. But for all of us here at The Score and the Top Shelf team, it's been a pleasure, and we'll see you next time.